If you're experiencing this, your quantum jump key just activated, and everything you thought you knew about reality is about to dissolve. This message didn't find you by accident. You didn't stumble across this randomly. Your consciousness magnetized this information to you because something extraordinary is happening in the quantum architecture of your being right now. It couldn't have appeared 24 hours ago because your nervous system wasn't stable enough to hold the frequency without snapping back into doubt. It couldn't have appeared a week ago because your probability structure was still locked into the old observer collapse pattern. But right now, the field is reorganizing around you. You can feel it, can't you? That strange transparency. Like the world is still here, but the illusion of solid is weakening. Like reality is revealing itself as fluid, while everyone else keeps acting as if nothing changed. This isn't your imagination failing. This isn't confusion. This isn't instability. This is quantum perception coming online. The key to quantum jumping isn't something you earn. It isn't something you build. It isn't something you force through effort. It activates automatically when consciousness reaches a specific frequency threshold. And if these words are landing, if something in your body recognizes this signal, your threshold has been reached. Your key is active. Here's what most people never understand. Quantum jumping isn't about moving between realities. It's about recognizing which reality you're already choosing to observe. Every moment, infinite versions of you exist across infinite probability fields. The version of you listening right now is the version that can sense the field before it collapses. Millions are scrolling, but only your type of consciousness pauses here and feels the glitch. Because the field doesn't broadcast advanced signals to unprepared systems. It selects through resonance. And now, here are the specific signs that confirm you're not imagining this. Time has stopped behaving normally around you. You look at the clock, expecting hours to have passed, and only minutes are gone. Or you swear it was minutes, and hours disappeared. This isn't distraction. This is temporal flexibility. Your awareness is beginning to operate with less dependence on linear sequence. Synchronicities aren't increasing, they're sharpening. You think of someone and they contact you. You need information and it appears without searching. Conversations land on the exact sentence you needed to hear. This isn't coincidence. This is quantum coherence influencing probability. You're experiencing glitches that feel too precise to dismiss. Conversations feel like they already happened. Moments feel pre-scripted. You hear the same phrase repeating across the day. These aren't random déjà vu fragments. These are quantum bleeds, overlapping probability streams becoming perceptible. Reality feels more fragile than everyone else believes. Not scary fragile, responsive fragile. Like if you focus the attention correctly, everything could shift. That's not delusion. That's recognition of the observer effect at a lived level. Observation doesn't just witness experience. Observation selects it. Your dreams feel more real than waking life. You wake up with information, not symbolism. You visit alternate versions of your life that feel familiar. This happens because dream state awareness isn't bound by the electromagnetic limitations of physical matter. Your consciousness moves through probability fields directly. Your intuition has upgraded into direct knowing. You sense outcomes before they occur. You read people before they speak. You know which choice collapses cleanly and which one fractures you. This isn't psychic ability. This is pre-collapse perception. Your body is showing frequency symptoms. Pressure behind the eyes, heat in the chest, tingling at the base of the skull. A subtle recalibration between the shoulder blades. These aren't random sensations. This is your nervous system adapting to hold quantum bandwidth without losing coherence. Technology reacts differently around you. Phones glitch during emotional intensity. Batteries drain faster during deep focus. Lights flicker when you pass. This isn't superstition. This is electromagnetic interaction. Your field output is changing. Old patterns became intolerable. Small talk feels like static. Misaligned work feels physically heavy. Certain environments drain you instantly. You can't pretend your way through what used to be normal. This isn't arrogance. This is calibration. Anything incompatible with your next frequency begins falling away. And the final confirmation is this moment itself. You didn't find this as entertainment. You found it as recognition. That quiet internal yes arrived before your mind could argue. This isn't anxiety. This isn't uncertainty. This is activation. Your journey wasn't random suffering. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't a series of wrong turns you failed to correct. It was preparation. Every challenge you faced wasn't there to break you. It was there to remove structures that could not survive where you're standing now. The relationships that ended when you were doing everything right, those weren't failures. They were attachment patterns being extracted. The career stagnation, the loss of motivation, the feeling that the future went blank. That wasn't laziness. That was a probability channel closing. The isolation phase, when people drifted, conversations felt hollow, and life went quiet in a way you couldn't explain. That wasn't abandonment. That was recalibration. Because coherence cannot be built on noise. Your nervous system had to learn how to exist without certainty. Your identity had to learn how to stand without narrative. Your attention had to learn how to stay present without control. Most people collapse during this stage. They rush to rebuild the old identity just to feel grounded again. You didn't. You stayed inside the ambiguity. You learned how to remain stable when meaning disappeared. You learned how to feel intensity without acting from it. You learned how to observe thought instead of obeying it. That isn't weakness. That's training. That's why surface-level solutions stopped working. That's why comfort lost its appeal. That's why pretending became physically exhausting. Your system was being tuned to hold quantum awareness without fracture. And now, only now, does the next layer become accessible. Because the universe does not activate quantum capability in a system that still needs illusion to feel safe. Now notice what's happening as you read this. Not emotionally, physically. A subtle pressure behind the eyes, a widening in the chest, a sense that thoughts are still occurring, but they're no longer in control. This isn't suggestion. This isn't imagination. This is coherence returning. When the nervous system stops bracing, awareness becomes obvious. When awareness becomes obvious, the observer reclaims position. Your breath deepens without instruction. Your jaw releases without permission. Your posture adjusts subtly, as if aligning itself. You're not doing anything. You're no longer interfering. That's why this feels ordinary and impossible at the same time. Ordinary because it's natural. Impossible because you were trained to overlook it. This is the moment the key becomes usable. Not because something new arrived, but because resistance left. And from here forward, reality responds differently. Not dramatically, precisely. You don't need to chase. You don't need to visualize. You don't need to force alignment. Every moment, you're already selecting which version of reality collapses into experience. The only difference now is that you can feel the selection happening. That quiet clarity, that drop in internal argument, that sense that something has already shifted, even though nothing big happened. That's the field locking in coherence. This isn't the jump. This is the stabilization that makes jumping possible. And once coherence is established, probability reorganizes on its own. You don't command it, you allow it. That's why this feels calm instead of euphoric. That's why there's no rush. That's why nothing needs to be proven. The system knows what it's doing now, and so do you. There's a moment that almost everyone misinterprets when they reach this point. It feels like disorientation, like standing between versions of yourself. Like clarity arrives in flashes but refuses to stay put. That's not instability, that's the edge. What's happening now isn't gradual growth. It's not working toward something. It's a quantum threshold. The reason it feels strange is because the old collapse mechanism stopped working. Before, reality selected itself for you, based on habit, based on fear, based on repetition. That system didn't break. It completed. Which means you're no longer collapsing reality from memory. You're standing in superposition. Multiple versions of your life exist simultaneously. And for the first time, you can feel them. That's why logic feels slow. why analysis increases tension instead of clarity, why certainty comes in sudden recognitions instead of plans. At this level, thinking doesn't select, it interferes. Control creates noise. Explanation delays collapse. Waiting widens instability. The field responds to coherence, not understanding. This is where most people panic. They rush to rebuild the old identity just to feel grounded again. They choose familiarity over alignment. They choose certainty over truth. You don't have that option anymore. Because once awareness steps forward, pretending to be unconscious creates friction. And friction becomes unbearable at this frequency. So what's actually in front of you right now is an opportunity. It's decision. Every choice collapses a different timeline. You can feel which ones drain you immediately. You can feel which ones stabilize you, even if they scare you. That sensation isn't emotion, it's signal. Control or surrender. Explanation or movement. Comfort or coherence. Gradual drift or clean leap. There is no neutral ground here. Even hesitation is a choice, and it collapses toward contraction. This isn't pressure, it's physics. Superposition collapses through commitment. Not mental commitment, somatic commitment. Alignment without negotiation. That's why half choices feel awful. That's why straddling paths exhausts you. That's why "I'll decide later" increases tension instead of resolving it. Certainty comes after collapse, not before. And when the decision is made, cleanly, without internal argument, something immediate happens. The body releases. Attention stabilizes. Internal noise drops. Not because everything is solved, but because the field finally has direction. That's when reality begins reorganizing. Not magically, precisely. Timing starts cooperating. People respond differently. Opportunities appear without force. What felt heavy loses relevance. This isn't reward. This is alignment, removing friction. And here's what matters beyond you. Your choice doesn't stay contained. When one system stabilizes in coherence, it becomes a reference signal. Other systems entrain automatically. Not through words, through field interaction. That's why people open up around you without knowing why. Why others feel uncomfortable in your presence. Why rooms change when you enter. You're not influencing them. You're broadcasting coherence. At scale, this is how collective shifts happen. Not through agreement, through stabilized nodes. Your leap strengthens the field others draw from. Your clarity lowers the noise floor. Your alignment makes similar alignment more accessible to those near the same threshold. This isn't responsibility, it's consequence. And this is why half commitment is expensive. It emits distortion instead of signal. Clean choices create clean collapse. Now let this register in the body. Sit upright, feet grounded, breath slow. Notice the sensation of knowing without explanation. That quiet internal alignment that doesn't need justification. That's the mechanism. You don't force the jump. You stop interfering with the collapse. From here, reality doesn't need to be pushed. It responds. And it's responding now. I need to tell you something most people never hear at this point. Because what's happening now isn't poetic. It's destabilizing. And this is where many people turn back. There was a time when my life looked functional from the outside. Successful by conventional standards. Busy, productive. But every morning felt like putting on a costume. Like I was playing a role that no longer belonged to me. I kept waiting for my real life to start. Not realizing that waiting itself was the mechanism keeping me locked in the wrong probability stream. Then everything collapsed at once. The relationship ended. The work structure disintegrated. My health dipped. My sense of direction vanished. From the outside, it looked like a breakdown. From the inside, it felt like standing in empty space with no instructions. The mistake I made at first was trying to fix it. Trying to think my way back to safety. Trying to rebuild something familiar just to stop the discomfort. That only made it worse. The moment everything shifted was ordinary. No ritual, no vision, no dramatic insight. I stopped trying to control the process. I stopped trying to define what was happening. I allowed awareness to be present without asking it to justify itself. and something reorganized. Not gradually, not symbolically, quantum. Within weeks, decisions clarified without effort. Conversations changed tone without intent. Opportunities appeared without pursuit. Not because I became more powerful, but because I stopped fragmenting. That's the part no one tells you. The edge doesn't respond to effort. It responds to permission. And that's why this phase feels so precise. Because you're not being asked to do more. You're being asked to stop holding what can't cross with you. Now here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. You are standing at what's called the quantum edge, a state where multiple probable futures exist simultaneously. In the past, your identity collapsed one automatically, based on habit, fear, conditioning. That mechanism no longer works. Not broken, completed. That's why clarity comes in flashes instead of plans. That's why logic feels slow. That's why overthinking increases tension instead of reducing it. You're no longer collapsing reality from memory. You're standing in superposition. At this edge, thinking doesn't select. It interferes. Explanation delays collapse. Control creates noise. Waiting widens instability. The field doesn't respond to understanding. It responds to coherence. This is why it feels uncomfortable to hesitate. Why half choices drain you. Why trying to keep options open feels unbearable. Certainty comes after collapse, not before. And collapse happens through commitment, not mental commitment, somatic commitment, alignment without negotiation. This is why the body knows before the mind, why something feels right even when it scares you, why something feels wrong even when it looks perfect. That sensation isn't emotion, it's signal. You cannot think your way across this edge. You cannot plan your way across. You cannot perfect yourself across. You cross by stepping. And the ground appears because coherence demands it. This isn't spiritual, it's structural. And the reason you're here now is because the old collapse pattern cannot sustain your trajectory anymore. The edge doesn't ask for bravery, it asks for honesty. Stop pretending the old path still fits. Stop negotiating with what already completed. Stop asking questions designed to delay movement. Because the field isn't waiting for certainty. It's waiting for direction. There are a small number of choices in front of you right now. Not hypothetical ones. Active ones. And every single one collapses a different timeline. You don't need a list to feel them. Your body already registers the difference. Some options drain you the moment you consider them. Others stabilize you, even if they come with fear. That contrast isn't emotion. It's signal. One path keeps you in control. The other removes the need for control. One path preserves familiarity. The other preserves coherence. One path lets you explain yourself. The other lets you move. This is where people get confused. They think the discomfort means they're doing something wrong. It doesn't. Discomfort here means the old identity can't cross. Comfort here means contraction. At this level, gradual change is avoidance disguised as patience. There is no smooth bridge across the edge. There is only a clean step, or endless oscillation. Trying to keep options open fragments your field. Half commitment emits noise. Straddling timelines exhausts your system. That's why you feel tired when you delay. That's why indecision feels heavier than action. Because superposition collapses through commitment. Not intellectual commitment, somatic commitment. Alignment without internal negotiation. You already know which direction is coherent. You've known for a while. The body tightens when you consider one option. The body opens when you consider the other. That's the map. Now here is how you move without forcing anything. First, name the edge, once. Out loud or internally. No drama, just accuracy. I recognize this is an edge. That single recognition stabilizes awareness. Next, regulate before you act. 3 slow breaths. Inhale through the nose. Exhale longer than the inhale. You're not calming yourself. You're signaling safety to the nervous system so it doesn't sabotage coherence. Then release what you're afraid to lose. Not philosophically. Practically. Write it down if needed. Name the attachments, the identities, the outcomes you're still protecting. And then Acknowledge the truth. These were structures, not me. After that, define what you will not violate moving forward. Not goals, standards. Clarity, integrity, alignment. Whatever is non-negotiable now. These become your coherence filter. Then take one aligned action. Not symbolic, not dramatic, concrete. A call, a boundary, a decision you've been postponing. The field responds to motion, not intention. At the end of the day, don't track mood, track signal. Notice synchronicities, ease, unexpected clarity, resistance disappearing where it used to fight back. Finally, complete the collapse. Choose one decision you've been delaying. Make it, without contingency plans, without keeping an escape route open. Say it clearly. I commit to this path. The field can reorganize now. That's not affirmation, that's instruction. This protocol doesn't create alignment. It removes interference. And once interference is gone, collapse is automatic. Reality doesn't need to be convinced. It responds to coherence every time. Here's what happens after the collapse. Not metaphorically, structurally. In the first moments, the body responds before the mind understands. Breath drops lower, the chest loosens. There's a brief flicker of fear, then quiet. That's the nervous system registering coherence instead of threat. The field locks direction. Within the first hour, mental noise may spike once. Old doubts make a final attempt to reassert control. Then attention steadies, not because questions disappeared, but because they lost urgency. Within the first day, reality begins giving feedback. Not dramatic signs, practical ones. A message arrives that confirms timing. A delay protects you from the wrong outcome. Something that felt heavy yesterday suddenly feels irrelevant, not resolved, irrelevant. Within the first week, energy returns, but cleaner, focused, not driven by pressure. You'll notice conversations moving faster toward truth. Tolerance for noise drops sharply. You don't argue your way out of misalignment anymore. You exit it. Over the next few weeks, the environment reorganizes. Some relationships fall away without conflict. Others appear with strange familiarity. Opportunities arise that require you to be exactly who you are now, not who you were before. Timing becomes cooperative. Effort multiplies instead of draining. What used to require pushing now requires positioning. This isn't luck. It's friction disappearing. By a few months in, identity stabilizes around coherence. You stop explaining yourself. Decisions feel obvious. You trust your timing. Not because you believe in it, but because it keeps working. You're not euphoric, you're grounded. And that's how you know this is real. Now here's the part that matters. This window is not permanent. Collective systems are destabilizing. Old structures are dissolving. That creates brief periods where probability is unusually malleable. You're inside one of those periods now. When the window is open, movement compounds quickly. Support appears fast. Reality responds with precision. When it closes, things still work, but slowly, with resistance, with repetition. This isn't punishment, it's physics. Edges don't wait for certainty. They respond to timing. You are not being rushed. You are being informed. If you step now, the field amplifies you. If you hesitate, the system stabilizes without you and the edge passes. That doesn't mean failure. It means the leap becomes heavier later. History is full of missed edges, moments where conditions aligned and people waited for reassurance instead of responding. This is not pressure, it's clarity. That quiet urgency you feel, that's not fear. That's alignment, noticing opportunity. The collective field is shifting. Enough individuals are choosing coherence that timelines are diverging. And you are already standing at the split. You don't need to save anyone. You don't need to lead anyone. You only need to choose cleanly. Because when one system stabilizes in coherence, others entrain automatically. That's how fields work. The window is open. Not forever, but now. Your leap was never just personal. That's the part that becomes obvious only after coherence stabilizes. Individual systems don't operate in isolation. They're entangled. At the level of consciousness, choice propagates. When one nervous system locks into coherence, it becomes a reference signal. Other systems feel it, not emotionally, structurally. This is why people respond differently to you now. Some open up without knowing why. Some become uncomfortable without explanation. Some feel calmer just being near you. You're not influencing them. You're entraining the field. At scale, this is how collective shifts actually happen. Not through belief, not through persuasion, through stabilized nodes of coherence. Your decision doesn't stay contained inside your life. It slightly reweights probability in the environments you move through. It lowers the noise floor. It makes alignment more accessible to others who are close to the same threshold but haven't stepped yet. This is quantum entanglement expressed through human systems. That's why half commitment is expensive. Not morally, energetically. Distorted choices emit distorted signals. Clean choices emit clean collapse. You're not responsible for the world, but you are responsible for the signal you emit. And right now, your signal is legible. This is how bridges form, not by teaching, not by convincing, by stabilizing. When coherence holds in one place, it creates a corridor others can walk through without knowing why it suddenly feels easier. That's what you become, not a guide, a reference point. And now, this is how you seal it. Sit upright, feet grounded, one hand on the center of your chest. Take 3 slow breaths. No visualization, no effort. On the 3rd exhale, say quietly, I stop waiting. Pause. I choose coherence. Pause. I allow the next configuration to form. That's not affirmation, that's registration. Within the next 24 hours, take one action you've been postponing. One. Concrete. Irreversible enough to signal seriousness. Not to prove anything. To complete the collapse. After that, don't manage the outcome. Don't track results. Don't look for confirmation. Let the field respond. You'll feel it. The quiet clarity. The drop in internal argument. The sense that things are moving without force. That's not excitement. That's alignment. You crossed the threshold. The field registered your signal. The window answered. From here forward, the work isn't effort. It's follow-through. And you already know the difference. At this point, something subtle has already changed. Not emotionally, structurally. You may have noticed that your old strategies don't activate anymore. You don't automatically rehearse explanations. You don't spin stories to make things make sense. You don't brace for impact the way you used to. That's not because life got easier. It's because your system stopped defaulting to defense. What you're experiencing now is what happens when consciousness stops outsourcing authority to memory. Before, decisions were filtered through past outcomes, through learned caution, through identity preservation. Now, decisions pass through coherence first. That's why the body responds faster than thought. That's why something can look perfect on paper and still feel wrong. That's why something uncertain can feel unmistakably correct. This is not intuition as a sense. This is alignment as a function. When coherence becomes primary, the mind's role changes. It stops trying to predict. It starts implementing. This is where many people get confused. They think they've lost motivation. They haven't. They've lost distortion. Motivation was never the engine. It was compensation for misalignment. When the signal is clean, movement doesn't need emotional fuel. It happens because resistance is gone. You may notice periods of stillness now. Not avoidance, not stagnation. Integration. Your system is recalibrating how much input it actually needs. Less stimulation, less explanation, less noise. That's not withdrawal, that's efficiency. And here's the part that matters. When coherence stabilizes, the field stops testing you with chaos. It tests you with precision. Small choices, subtle boundaries, moments where saying yes or no quietly determines trajectory. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. This is how probability locks in. You'll notice that when you honor signal, things move easily. When you override it, even slightly, Friction appears immediately. Delayed responses, minor obstacles, energy drain. This feedback isn't punishment, it's calibration. The system is teaching you to trust alignment faster than thought. And now, the next shift begins. You stop experiencing life as a sequence of problems to solve. You experience it as a set of configurations to choose from. Each configuration has a distinct feel, a different weight, a different level of coherence. You don't analyze them, you sense them. This is the transition from linear cause and effect to field-based navigation. You're no longer asking, what should I do? You're asking, which configuration is already stable? That question collapses timelines faster than effort ever could. Because reality doesn't reorganize around desire. It reorganizes around coherence. And now, something important. As this stabilizes, your tolerance for misalignment will drop sharply. Not because you're rigid, because your system can no longer afford inefficiency. You may walk away from things faster. You may say less. You may choose differently without explaining why. This isn't detachment, it's accuracy. You're not becoming less human, you're becoming less fragmented. And that's why the so-called quantum jump stops feeling like an event. It becomes a way of operating. Quiet, precise, consistent. You're not chasing a new reality. You're no longer feeding the old one. And that's enough to change everything. At this stage, the shift stops announcing itself. No signals, no sensations to track, no internal narration. What changes now is behavior, quietly. You stop reacting to things that used to hook you, not because you're detached, because they no longer register as relevant. Your attention becomes selective without effort. What matters draws you in. What doesn't simply fails to engage. This is not discipline. This is coherence, filtering input automatically. You may notice that you speak less, but with more accuracy. When you do speak, things land. Not emotionally, structurally. People hear what you say differently now. Not because you're persuasive, because there's no internal contradiction behind your words. Your nervous system isn't split between what you say and what you mean. That alignment is felt before it's understood. This is why conversations move faster, why misunderstandings dissolve quickly, why some interactions end sooner than expected. It's not loss, it's efficiency. At this level, the field stops responding to intention and starts responding to consistency. One aligned action matters more than 1,000 affirmations. One clean boundary does more than hours of explanation. One honest no stabilizes more than endless accommodation. You're learning this without effort. And here's something most people don't realize until much later. When coherence stabilizes, your timeline becomes quieter, but more powerful. There's less drama, less fluctuation, fewer extremes, but outcomes carry more weight. Decisions ripple further. Small moves produce disproportionate results. This is because energy is no longer leaking across competing identities. Everything you do comes from the same center. That's why fatigue changes. You may still get tired, but it's physical, not existential. Rest actually restores you now. And now, a deeper truth begins to surface. You are no longer here to figure yourself out. That phase is complete. What's emerging instead is participation. Not obligation, not mission. Participation. You start noticing where your presence stabilizes situations, where clarity emerges simply because you're involved, where things resolve faster when you don't interfere. This isn't leadership, it's resonance. You don't fix systems, you don't correct people, you don't carry responsibility for outcomes. You simply hold coherence. And coherence organizes what's around it. This is why you were isolated earlier. Your system had to stabilize without interference, had to learn its own signal before entering shared fields again. Now that stability exists, interaction becomes functional instead of draining. You don't absorb chaos. You don't resist it. It reorganizes or moves away. This is the point where life stops testing your strength and starts testing your precision. Not big challenges, small ones. Moments where speaking or staying silent matters. Moments where timing is everything. Moments where alignment is obvious but easy to override. This is how mastery develops, not through intensity, through consistency. And as this settles, you'll notice something unmistakable. You're no longer searching for confirmation. You're watching cause and effect unfold in real time. Not because you're controlling it, because you're finally aligned with it. This is not the end. It's not a beginning. It's operational stability. And from here, everything you do counts. Nothing more needs to happen for this to complete. Because the final shift was never about adding something. It was about stopping the last form of resistance. Up to this point, awareness was learning how to stabilize, how to hold coherence without collapsing back into habit, how to remain present without needing explanation. Now that stabilization is complete, what changes next isn't internal sensation, it's trajectory. From here forward, reality doesn't test you with intensity. It tests you with alignment. Small decisions matter more than big intentions. Timing matters more than effort. Consistency matters more than ambition. You won't feel pulled toward becoming anything. You'll feel guided toward expressing what's already coherent. This is where life stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts behaving like a system that responds. Not because you control it, but because you're no longer interfering with it. You don't need to hold on to any of this. You don't need to remember the words. You don't need to repeat the process. If coherence is present, it persists on its own. And if it ever wavers, the signal will be immediate. Not as fear, as contraction. That feedback is enough. This is the end of preparation, the end of recalibration, the end of waiting. What follows is application. Quiet, precise, unforced. Let reality meet you where you are now. It knows how,